I was sent to recover a lost Apollo capsule. What we found, hidden on the moon, wasn't human. Look, before I go any further, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now telling me where you're listening from. Your bedroom, your car, walking your dog, wherever. Because if this video gets taken down tomorrow, if I disappear next week, at least I'll know someone out there heard what I'm about to tell you. My name is Captain David Mitchell. I'm 45 years old. I have a wife, 2 kids, and for 20 years I served in the United States Air Force with a spotless record. I'm telling you this because in about 10 minutes, you're going to think I've completely lost my mind. I haven't. God, I wish I had. It would be so much easier than living with what I know. It started on September 14th, 2019. I remember the exact date because it was my daughter Emma's 13th birthday. We were at the soccer field in Colorado Springs, watching her team practice. My son Jake was complaining about being bored. My wife Rebecca was on her phone coordinating the birthday party for that weekend. It was so normal. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something made me answer. Maybe instinct, maybe fate. I don't know anymore. The voice on the other end was male, flat, emotionless. He didn't ask if I was David Mitchell. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, Nevada, tomorrow, RO 600 hours, come alone. Then he rattled off coordinates and the line went dead. That was it. No explanation, no please or thank you. Just coordinates to the middle of the goddamn desert. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would I go? Why wouldn't I call someone, report it, tell my commanding officer? But here's the thing about working in classified military operations, which I did for 15 years. You develop a sense for these things. The tone of that voice, the specific military time format, those coordinates. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a wrong number. It had all the markers of something official, something black budget, something that existed in the shadows between what the government admits and what actually happens. And in that world, when you get a call like that, saying no isn't really an option. You go, or you spend the rest of your career wondering what door you just closed on yourself. I didn't sleep that night. I told Rebecca it was a last-minute training exercise at Nellis Air Force Base, which wasn't entirely unusual. She kissed me, told me to be safe, and went back to planning Emma's party. I packed a small duffel bag, basic clothes, toiletries, nothing special, and spent the whole night staring at my ceiling. Part of me knew, even then, that whatever I was driving toward was going to split my life into 2 parts, before and after. You ever have that feeling? Like you're standing on the edge of something, and you can either step back to safety or jump into the dark? I jumped. I've regretted it every single day since. The drive took 8 hours. I left at 10 p.m. to make the 0600 deadline. Drove through the night on empty highways with nothing but gas station coffee and classic rock keeping me awake. The coordinates led me to what looked like an abandoned gas station off Highway 375. You know it as the extraterrestrial highway, the one that runs along the edge of Area 51. Yeah, that should have been my first red flag. I pulled into the empty lot at 5:53 a.m. There was nothing there. Just cracked concrete, a rusted pump, and miles of desert in every direction. The sun was just starting to turn the horizon pink. I sat in my truck, engine running, watching the clock tick toward a 600. At exactly 6 o'clock, I saw it. A black SUV coming up the road with no headlights, just a dark shape moving through the dawn. 2 men got out. Both wore civilian clothes, jeans, jackets, sunglasses, even though the sun was barely up. But I could tell. Military bearing. The way they moved, the way their eyes scanned everything. These weren't rent-a-cops or private security. These were operators. The taller one, probably 6'3" with a jaw like a brick, walked straight to my window and said, "Captain Mitchell, leave your phone and your truck keys in the vehicle. Bring nothing else. Follow us." Not a question, not a request. I did what he said. We walked toward what I thought was just a rock formation about 50 yards from the gas station, and that's when I saw it. A steel door built into the rock face, camouflaged so perfectly I never would have spotted it from the road. One of the men pressed his hand against a panel and the door slid open with a hiss of pressurized air. Inside was an elevator. Not a normal elevator. This thing was industrial, all steel and rivets, with walls thick enough to survive a nuclear blast. We stepped in, the doors closed, and we started going down. Not just down, down. My ears popped once, twice, 3 times. The elevator was fast, but the descent felt like it lasted forever. I tried to count the seconds but lost track after 3 minutes. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the mechanical hum and my own breathing, which I had to consciously slow down because my training was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. When those doors finally opened, I stepped out into a corridor that looked like something out of a Cold War movie. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, exposed pipes, and armed guards stationed every 50 feet. This wasn't some temporary facility. This was permanent. This was billions of dollars buried under the Nevada desert. They led me through a maze of corridors, each one requiring a different security clearance, a different retinal scan, a different checkpoint. Finally, we reached a door marked only with a number, 7. Inside was a briefing room with a long metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and 5 other people already seated. I recognized the uniforms: 2 Navy, 1 Army, 2 Air Force besides me, all of us between 40 and 50, all of us with that same confused, cautious expression. At the head of the table sat a woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a NASA identification badge that looked official but had no name printed on it. She looked at each of us in turn, her eyes cold and evaluating, like she was calculating how much pressure each of us could take before we broke. She waited until the door closed behind me, waited until I sat down, and then she spoke. Her voice was flat, practiced, the voice of someone who'd delivered terrible news so many times it no longer affected her. "Gentlemen," she said, "my name is not important. What is important is that you've been selected for a recovery mission of the highest possible classification. What I'm about to tell you exists at a level above top secret, above cosmic. There is no official name for this clearance level because officially, it doesn't exist. Before we continue, you will each sign a document that legally binds you to complete silence for the rest of your natural lives. If you violate this agreement, if you speak to your spouse, your priest, your therapist, anyone, you will not be arrested. You will not be charged with a crime. You will simply disappear. Your family will be told you died in a training accident. Do you understand?" We all nodded. What the hell else were we supposed to do? She pressed a button on a remote, and a projector hummed to life behind her. On the screen was a photograph of a lunar module. It looked like the Apollo modules I'd seen in museums as a kid, but something was wrong with it. The markings were different. The serial numbers didn't match anything I recognized. "This," she said, and I'll never forget the way her voice dropped half an octave, "is Apollo 20. According to every history book, every official NASA record, every documented timeline of the space program, this mission never happened. The Apollo program ended with Apollo 17 in December 1972, but that's a lie. Apollo 18, 19, and 20 were real. They launched in secret. And Apollo 20, she paused, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes. Fear, regret. Apollo 20 found something on the dark side of the moon, something that was never supposed to be found. And now, 50 years later, we're going to go get it. The room went completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. That's when I knew whatever normal life I'd had before that moment was over. The woman let that statement hang in the air for a moment. Apollo 20 found something, and I watched it sink into each person around that table. The guy sitting across from me, Navy officer with salt and pepper hair, actually laughed. Not a real laugh, more like a nervous reflex, like his brain was trying to reject what he'd just heard. The woman didn't react. She just clicked to the next slide. It was a grainy black and white photograph, clearly taken from orbit, showing the lunar surface. She pointed to a dark crater near the edge of the frame. "This is the Delport Isaac region on the far side of the moon. In August 1976, Apollo 20 landed here on a mission that officially never happened. The crew consisted of Commander William Rutledge and lunar module pilot Leona Snyder. Their mission was simple: investigate an anomaly that had been photographed during earlier Apollo missions, but kept classified. What they found," she paused again, and I swear the temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees. "What they found changed everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe." She clicked through several more photographs. Each one showed the same crater from different angles, different distances. And then she stopped on one image that made my stomach drop. There, half buried in lunar regolith, was the Apollo 20 lunar module. But that wasn't what made my hands start sweating. Next to it, maybe 200 meters away, there was something else. A structure, not natural rock formation. You could see straight edges, geometric patterns, something that screamed artificial construction. The crew reported finding this structure on their second EVA, the woman continued. her voice steady like she was describing a grocery list. They entered it. They documented what they found inside. And then, 48 hours later, all communication with Apollo 20 ceased. The last transmission we received was Commander Rutledge saying 3 words. They know we're here. After that, silence. Total communications. Blackout. The capsule never returned to Earth. The crew never came home. And for 50 years, their bodies have been sitting in that lunar module, waiting. The woman pressed another button, and the lights came up slightly. That's when I really got a good look at the other people in the room. To my right was an older guy, maybe 55, with thick-rimmed glasses and the soft hands of someone who'd never held a gun in his life. He was wearing a NASA polo shirt, and his badge identified him as Dr. Richard Chen, though that might not have been his real name. He looked like he was going to throw up. To my left was a woman in an Air Force dress uniform, absolutely rigid posture, dark hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. Her name tag read Reeves, and her rank was Major. She was the only person in the room who didn't look terrified. She looked angry, like she'd been lied to her whole career and was just now realizing it. The other 3 men I didn't get a good read on yet, but we'd have plenty of time to get acquainted later, if we survived. Your mission, the woman said, and now she was looking directly at me, is to recover that capsule and bring back everything inside it. The bodies, the equipment, the records, and most importantly, any samples or documentation related to what they found in that structure. This will be a joint NASA military operation with full deniability. If something goes wrong, if you don't come back, your families will be told there was a training accident. There will be a funeral with an empty casket. You will become ghosts. She let that sink in for a moment. The mission window opens in 3 weeks. You'll launch from a mobile platform in the Pacific, far from any civilian observation. The flight will take 4 days. You'll have 72 hours on the lunar surface to complete the recovery. Then you come home. Questions? The Major, Reeves, spoke first. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but I could hear the edge in it. Why now? Why wait 50 years to go back? The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because 3 months ago, a Chinese lunar satellite photographed that same region. They saw the structure. They saw our module. And they're planning their own mission to investigate. We need to get there first. We need to recover our people, and we need to sanitize that site before anyone else sets foot on it. Sanitize. That's a military word that means make it disappear. Make it like it never existed. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just a recovery mission. This was a cover-up. Dr. Chen raised his hand slightly, like he was in a classroom. What exactly did they find in the structure? What are we recovering? The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation? Fear? We don't know the full extent. The last coherent transmission mentioned biological samples, technology, and what Commander Rutledge described as a harvest operation. Those were his exact words, a harvest operation. Whatever that means, whatever they saw in there, it was enough to make 2 decorated astronauts break every protocol and go radio silent. Your job is not to understand it. Your job is to bring it back so people smarter than all of us can figure out what the hell happened up there. Biological samples, harvest operation. Those words kept echoing in my head. I raised my hand, and the woman nodded at me. Ma'am, with all due respect, if this mission is so critical, why us? Why not send actual astronauts? People trained for lunar operations? She leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table. Because this mission doesn't exist, Captain Mitchell. We can't use active NASA astronauts because they ask too many questions and they have families who will notice if they vanish for 3 months of training. We need people with military discipline, people who understand operational security, and people who won't break when things get ugly. And things will get ugly. She straightened up. You 6 were selected because you have 3 things in common. You have extensive experience with classified operations. You have no history of mental health issues or substance abuse. And according to our psychological profiles, you're all capable of keeping your mouth shut, even under extreme pressure. Congratulations. The next slide showed a timeline. 3 weeks of intensive training at this facility. Physical conditioning, zero-gravity simulation, equipment familiarization, lunar surface procedures, then the launch, then 4 days in space, then the surface operation. Then, if we were lucky, we'd come home. If we were lucky. The woman distributed thick manila folders to each of us. These contain your mission briefing packets, non-disclosure agreements, and updated wills. Yes, wills. I strongly suggest you read everything tonight. Tomorrow morning at 600 training begins. You will live here for the next 3 weeks. No phone calls, no outside communication, no contact with your families until after the mission is complete. As of this moment, you are all officially on temporary assignment to a classified location. Your families have already been notified. Any questions? Nobody said anything. What were we going to say? No thanks. I'd rather go back to my normal life. That option had disappeared the moment we stepped into that elevator. The woman gathered her papers and stood up. Get some rest. You're going to need it. Dismissed. We all stood up like robots, grabbed our folders and filed out of the room. In the hallway, the 6 of us just looked at each other. The major, Reeves, was the first to speak. Well, she said, and I could hear the bitter humor in her voice. I guess we're going to the moon. Dr. Chen laughed nervously. I guess we are. And me? I just thought about my daughter's birthday party that I was going to miss. I thought about my wife's face when she got the call saying I couldn't come home for 3 weeks. I thought about that grainy photograph of something that shouldn't exist, buried in moon dust for half a century. And I thought, what the hell did those astronauts find up there that was worth dying for? I was about to find out. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. They woke us up every morning at 0500 with the same recorded bugle call that's been used to torture soldiers since before I was born. We'd eat breakfast in silence in a cafeteria that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Gray walls, metal tables, food that tasted like cardboard. And then we'd train. Physical conditioning that made basic training look like a warm-up. Centrifuge runs that pushed us to the edge of consciousness. Hours in pressure suits that weighed more than some people. Zero-gravity simulations in a pool so deep I couldn't see the bottom. And through it all, they drilled procedures into our heads. Emergency protocols, equipment checks, communication codes, over and over until we could do it all in our sleep. Because, they told us, on the moon, there would be no room for mistakes. One error, one moment of hesitation, and we'd end up like Rutledge and Snyder, frozen corpses waiting for someone to find us 50 years later. But here's what started bothering me around day 5. The inconsistencies, little things that didn't add up. For example, they kept showing us training footage from the original Apollo missions, right? Procedures for lunar surface operations, how to move in 1/6 gravity, how to collect samples, standard stuff. But then they'd show us equipment, the suits we'd be wearing, the tools we'd be using, and none of it matched. Our suits had modifications I'd never seen before. Extra layers around the torso and helmet, strange sensors built into the gloves. When I asked about it, the instructor, a grim-faced man who never gave us his name, just said it was upgraded technology for extended surface operations. But that wasn't it. These suits weren't designed for collecting samples. They were designed for protection. From what exactly? Nobody would tell us. Then there were the weapons. Yeah, you heard that right. On day 8, they showed us a specialized pistol, compact, modified for use in a pressurized environment, loaded with rounds designed not to puncture a spacesuit. For emergency situations, they said. Emergency situations on the moon? What kind of emergency requires a gun on an airless rock? When I asked, they gave me the same non-answer. Protocol for unknown contact scenarios. Unknown contact, not equipment failure, not medical emergency. Contact. With what? The question hung in the air like smoke, and nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Major Reeves caught my eye during that briefing, and I could see she was thinking the same thing I was. They weren't telling us everything, not even close. The 6 of us started bonding during those 3 weeks, the way people do when they're all scared of the same thing. The other 3 guys, 2 Navy SEALs and an Army Ranger, kept mostly to themselves, probably because they'd been on enough classified operations to know when to shut up and follow orders. But Dr. Chen, Reeves, and I ended up spending our limited free time together, mostly because we couldn't stop talking about all the things that didn't make sense. Chen was a lunar geologist, had worked for NASA for 20 years studying moon rocks brought back by the original Apollo missions. He'd dreamed his whole life of going to space, but not like this, he told me one night in the barracks. Not for this reason. Do you know what they told me when they recruited me? They said I'd be analyzing unprecedented geological formations. They made it sound like a scientific mission. They didn't mention bodies. They didn't mention structures. They sure as hell didn't mention harvest operations. Major Sarah Reeves was harder to read. She'd been a pilot for 15 years, flew everything from cargo planes to fighters, and she had that particular intensity that comes from being a woman in a male-dominated field. like she'd spent her whole career proving she belonged there and wasn't about to stop now. One night during week 2, we were in the 0G pool, practicing equipment retrieval procedures, when she swam over to me during a break. Her voice came through the comms, quiet but steady. "Mitchell, you notice how they keep showing us the approach trajectory? How we're coming in from a specific angle, staying low over the horizon until the last possible moment?" I had noticed. "They don't want us to be seen from Earth," I said. She nodded inside her helmet. "Exactly. But here's what's weird. They also don't want us visible from lunar orbit. Not from Earth satellites, not from the Chinese satellite, not from anything. It's like they're hiding us from multiple directions. Why would they do that unless they think someone else might be watching?" That thought kept me up at night. The idea that we weren't alone, that something up there might see us coming. During week 3, the training shifted. Less physical conditioning, more mission-specific protocols. They showed us detailed photographs of the Apollo 20 landing site, the structure, the terrain we'd have to cross. They walked us through every step of the recovery operation. How to approach the module, how to open it without damaging anything inside, how to extract the bodies, because yes, we'd be pulling 2 frozen corpses out of that capsule and loading them onto our lander. They showed us what equipment to prioritize: mission logs, sample containers, recording devices, anything that might contain data about what Rutledge and Snyder found in that structure. And then, almost as an afterthought, they told us, under no circumstances are you to enter the structure itself. Your mission is recovery only. Retrieve the capsule contents and return immediately. Is that understood? But here's the thing about telling people not to do something. It just makes them want to do it more. That night, Chen, Reeves, and I sat in the common area, speaking in low voices even though we were pretty sure the whole facility was bugged. "They're scared of that structure," Chen said, stirring his coffee obsessively. "Did you see the photographs? The geometry is wrong. The angles don't match any known architecture, human or natural. And those symbols on the walls? I've studied ancient writing systems, petroglyphs, every kind of markings humans have ever made on stone. Those aren't human." Reeves leaned forward. "So what are they?" Chen looked at both of us, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "I don't know, but whatever Rutledge and Snyder saw in there, it was enough to make them stop reporting back to Earth. Think about that. 2 trained astronauts, following protocols their entire lives, suddenly go dark. What could possibly be worth breaking that kind of discipline? On the last day before launch, they finally let us make phone calls home. Supervised, of course. Monitored, obviously. But they gave us 15 minutes each to call our families and say, "What, exactly? Goodbye. See you in a few weeks if I don't die in space." I sat in that little booth with the phone in my hand for a full minute before I dialed. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "Dave? Oh my God, where have you been? They said you were on some training thing, but 3 weeks? Emma's been asking about you every single day." I could hear the hurt in her voice, the frustration. And what could I say? "I'm sorry I missed our daughter's birthday because I've been training to recover dead astronauts from a secret moon mission." "I know," I said, and my voice sounded hollow even to me. "I know, and I'm sorry. This assignment is just... It's important. I can't talk about it, but it's almost over. I'll be home in a couple weeks. A couple weeks if everything went perfectly, if nothing went wrong, if we didn't end up like Rutledge and Snyder." "Dad?" Emma's voice came on the line, and my throat tightened. "Hey, sweetheart. Happy late birthday. I'm so sorry I missed it." She was quiet for a moment. "Mom said you're doing important work. Are you coming home soon?" I closed my eyes. "Yeah, baby. Real soon. I promise." But even as I said it, I thought about that photograph of the structure. I thought about those words. They know we're here. I thought about the weapons they'd given us, and the fear in Dr. Chen's eyes. "Emma, I need you to do me a favor, okay? Take care of your mom and your brother while I'm gone. Can you do that for me?" Another pause. "You're scaring me, Dad." And that's when I almost broke. Almost told her everything. Almost said, "Don't worry about it. I'm quitting this insane mission and coming home right now." But I didn't. Because I'm a coward, or because I'm a soldier, or maybe there's no difference. "Everything's fine," I lied. "I love you. Love you too, Dad." The line went dead, and I sat there in that booth, staring at the phone, knowing that might be the last time I ever heard my daughter's voice. 24 hours later, we were on a plane to the Pacific. 48 hours later, we'd be in space. And 72 hours after that, we'd be standing on the moon, staring at whatever killed 2 astronauts 50 years ago. They flew us out to the Pacific on a cargo plane with no windows and no markings. We sat on metal benches for 6 hours, the engine noise so loud we couldn't talk even if we wanted to. When the rear ramp finally opened, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Salt air, diesel fuel, and something else. Ozone, maybe? Or just the scent of open ocean. We were on a platform, not a ship, not exactly. It was a massive floating structure, maybe 3 football fields wide, sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere. No land in any direction, just gray water and gray sky meeting at a horizon so flat it looked fake. And in the center of that platform, standing vertical like a middle finger pointed at God, was our rocket. It didn't look like the Saturn V from the history books. This was sleeker, more modern, black instead of white, with no NASA logo, no American flag, no identification of any kind. Just a black pillar with our crew capsule sitting on top like a bullet in a chamber. The launch was scheduled for over 400 hours, early enough that any satellites passing overhead would be in the wrong position to catch us. They suited us up in a prefab building that smelled like rubber and disinfectant. The suit technicians worked in silence, checking seals, testing communications, going through their checklists with the kind of focused intensity that meant they knew exactly how many ways this could go wrong. When they sealed my helmet, the world suddenly got very small and very quiet. I could hear my own breathing, my own heartbeat, and nothing else. Chen was next to me, and through his visor I could see his eyes, wide, scared, but also excited. This was his dream after all, just not the version he'd imagined as a kid. Reeves was on my other side, completely still, completely focused. She caught me looking and gave me a small nod. No words, just acknowledgement. We were really doing this. The ride up to the capsule was in an elevator that moved so slowly I thought I might actually die of anxiety before we ever left the ground. We loaded in one by one, squeezing through the narrow hatch, settling into seats that had been custom molded to our bodies during training. I was in the middle row, Chen to my left, Reeves to my right. The 3 Navy and Army guys were in the row behind us. The hatch sealed with a heavy clunk, and suddenly we were locked in a metal can with no way out, except up or death. The capsule was cramped. All capsules are, but this one felt especially tight, like a coffin designed by engineers who'd never actually had to ride in one. Screens glowed in front of us, showing systems status, trajectory data, fuel levels. Everything was green. Everything was nominal. Everything was ready except my brain, which was screaming at me that this was insane. The countdown started at T-10 minutes, and those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. The voice over the comm was calm, almost bored, calling out each milestone like he was reading a grocery list. T-5 minutes. All systems green. Weather is acceptable. You are go for launch. Go for launch. Such simple words for something so completely irreversible. At T-1 minute, the entire capsule started vibrating, not shaking exactly. More like the whole thing was humming with contained energy, like a massive animal tensing its muscles before a sprint. I gripped the armrests so hard my hands ached. Chen was praying quietly in Mandarin. Reeves was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. T-30 seconds. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might actually crack a rib. T-10, 9, 8. This was it. The point of no return. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. The noise was beyond anything I can describe. Not just loud. Loud doesn't cover it. It was like being inside a continuous explosion, a roar so deep and powerful that I felt it in my bones, my teeth, my skull. The vibration was so intense I couldn't focus my eyes, couldn't see the screens in front of me, couldn't do anything but hold on and pray that the engineers who built this thing knew what they were doing. Then the pressure hit. 3 Gs, 4 Gs, 5. The weight of my own body crushing down on me, making it hard to breathe, impossible to move. I tried to turn my head to check on Chen, but I couldn't. I was pinned to my seat like a bug on a board. The roar continued. The pressure increased. And then, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 minutes, the first stage separated with a violent bang that made me think for a second we'd exploded. But we hadn't. We were still accelerating, still climbing. The second stage kicked in, smoother, but still pushing us relentlessly upward, away from Earth, away from everything I'd ever known. 8 minutes after launch, the engines cut out, and suddenly, we were weightless. My stomach lurched. Objects that hadn't been properly secured started floating, and my inner ear completely lost track of which way was up. This was nothing like the 0G pool. This was real. This was space. I looked at the small window to my right and saw something that made my breath catch. Earth. Not a photograph. Not a video. The actual Earth, hanging in the blackness like a blue and white marble. So beautiful and so fragile it almost hurt to look at. I could see weather patterns swirling over the Pacific, the Terminator line between day and night cutting across Asia, the whole living, breathing planet that contained everyone I'd ever known, everyone I'd ever loved, getting smaller by the second. And for just a moment I forgot about the mission. I forgot about Apollo 20 and the structure and the bodies. I just stared at home and realized I might never see it again. The flight to the moon took 4 days. 4 days in a space smaller than most people's bathrooms, eating food that tasted like wet cardboard, drinking water recycled from our own sweat and urine, and trying not to think about the fact that there was literally nothing between us and the infinite vacuum except a few layers of metal and composites. We fell into a routine because humans need routine to stay sane. Sleep shifts, meal times, equipment checks, exercise periods where we had to use resistance bands to keep our muscles from atrophying. But the whole time, hanging over everything, was the knowledge of where we were going and what we were going to find. At night, though night doesn't really mean anything when you're in space, I'd float by the window and stare at the moon getting bigger, closer, more real. From Earth it looks peaceful, romantic even. Up close, it just looked dead, gray and scarred and utterly lifeless. On day 3, we passed the point where Earth's gravity released us, and the moon's gravity took over. That's when it became real for me. We weren't going to space. We were going to somewhere. The moon stopped being a destination and became a place. A place where 2 people died. A place where something waited. Chen spent most of that day studying the photographs of the structure, his tablet floating in front of him, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. "You know what bothers me most?" he said quietly. "The age. Based on crater analysis and regolith displacement, that structure has been there for at least 10,000 years. Minimum. Maybe longer. Which means whatever built it was on the moon before we had written language, before we had civilization. They were there watching us, while we were still living in caves. The implications of that settled over the cabin like frost. If they'd been watching us for that long, what did they want? Why reveal themselves to Rutledge and Snyder? And why now, 50 years later, were we being sent to clean up the mess? On day 4, we performed our lunar orbit insertion burn, a nail-biting 15 minutes where we fired our engines to slow down just enough to be captured by the moon's gravity without crashing into the surface. It worked. We didn't die. And then we were there, orbiting 70 miles above the lunar surface, and I got my first real look at the far side. It's different from the near side. Darker, more heavily cratered. No smooth Maria, no seas like you see in photographs taken from Earth. Just endless gray wasteland pockmarked with impact craters that hadn't been eroded by wind or water because there is no wind or water. There's just rock and dust and silence that's lasted for billions of years. Reeves was at the controls, piloting us around to the far side, and as we crossed the Terminator into lunar night, Earth disappeared from the window. For the first time since we'd launched, we couldn't see home. We were completely alone on the dark side of the moon, and the only light came from our instruments and the distant stars. "There," Reeves said, and her voice was tight. She pointed at the navigation screen. "Delport Isaac Crater, 20 kilometers ahead." I looked out the window, straining to see anything in the darkness, and then I did. In the floor of a crater, barely visible in the scattered starlight, was a shape that didn't belong. Angular, man-made, the Apollo 20 lunar module, sitting exactly where it had been for the last 50 years. And beyond it, partially illuminated by the reflection of starlight off the crater walls, was something else, something massive, the structure. We were 5 minutes from landing when Chen said what we were all thinking. "Whatever happens down there, whatever we find, I just want you both to know it's been an honor." Reeves didn't respond. She was too focused on the descent sequence, adjusting thrusters, checking altitude. But I knew she heard him. We all heard him, because we all knew that in a few minutes, we'd be walking on the surface of the moon, approaching a place where 2 trained astronauts had vanished from history. And whatever had been waiting for them was still down there, waiting for us. The landing was rougher than any simulation. Reeves brought us down with the skill of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in training. But training doesn't prepare you for the real thing. The lunar module's legs hit the surface with a jolt that rattled my teeth. Bounced once. Actually bounced, because the moon's gravity is so weak, and then settled with a metallic groan that made me wonder if something had just broken. For about 30 seconds, nobody moved. We just sat there, listening to the sounds of the module settling, the faint creaks and pings of metal adjusting to temperature changes, and our own breathing inside our helmets. Then Reeves spoke, her voice steady, despite what we all knew was coming next. "We're down. All systems nominal. Pressure holding steady." She turned to look at me, and even through the visor, I could see the tension in her face. "Mitchell, you ready for this?" I nodded because speaking felt too hard. "Ready? No. But we were here and there was no going back now. The three of us, me, Reeves, and Chen, were designated for the surface operation. The other three would stay in the module as backup and communications relay. We went through the depressurization checklist step by step, checking our suits, our oxygen levels, our communications equipment. Everything was green. Everything was ready. Chen was fidgeting with his gloves, opening and closing his hands repeatedly. "You okay?" I asked him. He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "I'm about to walk on the moon, Mitchell, the actual moon, and the first thing I'm going to see is a 50-year-old crime scene. So no, I'm not okay, but let's do it anyway." When the hatch opened and I looked down at the ladder, at the gray lunar dust below, my brain suddenly supplied an absolutely useless fact. I was the 47th human being to stand on the moon. 47th, out of billions. The thought lasted exactly as long as it took me to climb down the ladder and plant my boots on the surface. The moon doesn't feel like anything. That's the weird part. On Earth, when you step on dirt or sand or rock, there's a sense of connection, of solidity. Here, there was just nothing. The regolith compressed under my boots with no resistance, leaving perfect footprints that would probably last a million years. The silence was absolute. On Earth, there's always some kind of ambient sound, wind, birds, distant traffic. Here, the only thing I could hear was my own breathing, my own heartbeat, and the occasional crackle of static on the comm. I looked up, and the stars were so bright and so numerous, it was almost painful. No atmosphere to dim them, no light pollution, just millions upon millions of points of light burning in the infinite black. And hanging there among them, small and blue and impossibly far away, was Earth, home, everything I'd ever known, reduced to a tiny sphere I could cover with my thumb. "Mitchell, focus." Reeves's voice snapped me back. She was already several meters ahead, following the navigation indicators in her helmet display. Chen was between us, moving carefully, his geological hammer already in his hand, even though we weren't here for geology. The Apollo 20 module was 300 meters away, sitting in the shadow of the crater wall. We walked slowly, deliberately, kicking up little clouds of dust with each step. In 1/6 gravity, every movement felt dreamlike, disconnected. I kept expecting to feel wind or hear sound, and the complete absence of both was deeply unsettling. It took us 15 minutes to cover the distance, and the whole time I kept looking around, scanning the crater rim, the rock formations, searching for any kind of movement. For what? I don't know. Nothing lives here. Nothing can live here. But I looked anyway. When we got close enough to see the Apollo 20 module clearly, I stopped walking. I actually stopped and just stared. The photographs hadn't prepared me. In pictures, it looked weathered but intact. In person, it looked wrong. The module was partially buried, just like they'd said. But it wasn't buried the way something sinks into soft ground. It looked like something had been deliberately piled around it. The regolith was pushed up against the legs, the descent stage, even parts of the ascent stage, in patterns that couldn't be natural, too uniform, too purposeful, and there were marks on the hull, scratches maybe, or gouges, long parallel lines that caught the light when I moved my head. "You seeing this?" I asked. Chen was already examining the ground around the module with his helmet camera, recording everything. "Yeah, this regolith displacement is wrong. This is recent. Geologically recent, I mean. Within the last few decades, something moved this dust." We approached the hatch slowly. The ladder was still deployed, hanging down like it had been left there yesterday, instead of 50 years ago. Reeves went up first, her movements practiced and efficient. I followed, with Chen behind me. The hatch was closed but not sealed. You could tell because there was a thin layer of dust on the seal that should have been vacuum tight. Reeves tried the handle. It turned easily, too easily. "The hatch is unlocked," she said, and I could hear the question in her voice. Standard procedure was to lock it from inside if you were abandoning the module. Why wouldn't they lock it? She pulled it open, and the interior went from dark to dimly lit as our helmet lights swept across the cramped space. "Going in," she said, and disappeared through the opening. I climbed in after her, pulling myself up in the low gravity, and my light caught something that made my stomach drop. Blood. Dried blood on the control panel, sprayed across the communications equipment, spattered on the ceiling. Not a lot, maybe a cup's worth total, but enough. Enough to know that something violent had happened in this tiny space. "Jesus," Chen whispered behind me. He'd seen it too. We were all frozen for a moment, our lights playing across the blood patterns, and I realized I was holding my breath like I might disturb something. "Where are the bodies?" Reeves asked, and that's when I noticed. The crew seats were empty. The mission brief said we'd find 2 bodies in the module, Commander William Rutledge and Lunar Module pilot Leona Snyder, but there was nobody here. Just blood and empty seats and the thick, accusatory silence of a place where something terrible had happened. Then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I spun, my hand instinctively going to the weapon on my hip, and my light caught the source. There, in the storage compartment near the back of the module, was a spacesuit, and inside the spacesuit was a body, but it wasn't sitting up or strapped down like you'd expect. It was crammed into the compartment, folded in on itself in a way that looked profoundly wrong, like someone had tried to hide it, or like it had tried to hide itself. "Found one," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. I moved closer, reaching out to touch the suit, and that's when I saw the helmet. The visor was cracked, not shattered, but spiderwebbed with fractures, and through those fractures, I could see a face, or what was left of one. The skin was gray and desiccated, pulled tight over the skull, lips drawn back in what looked like a scream, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the eyes. They were open, and they were looking at me. "This is Rutledge," Chen said, checking the name patch on the suit. "Commander William Rutledge." He moved his light down the body, and we all saw it at the same time. The suit was damaged, not torn or punctured in a way that would cause explosive decompression. It was melted. Parts of the material around the torso and arms had been subjected to extreme heat, enough to fuse the layers together and warp the metal components. "What could do that?" Reeves asked. "A rocket exhaust blast?" Chen shook his head. "No, this is localized, specific. And look," he pointed to the arms. "The damage pattern is consistent with the body trying to protect itself. The arms are raised, defensive posture. Whatever did this, he saw it coming." We stared at the body for a long moment, and I think we were all having the same thought. If this was Rutledge, crammed into a storage compartment with melted suit, and that expression of pure terror on his face, where the hell was Snyder? "Contact," one of the guys back in our module said over the comm, and my heart jumped into my throat. "Say again," Reeves snapped. "We're picking up a signal. Very faint, intermittent, coming from bearing 270. About 2 kilometers from your position. 2 kilometers. That was the direction of the structure, the place we'd been explicitly ordered not to approach." I looked at Reeves, and she looked at me, and I saw in her eyes what I was feeling. We'd come all this way. 2 people had died here, and now there was a signal, a transmission of some kind, coming from the one place we were supposed to avoid. "We need to check the rest of the module," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. We all knew we weren't going to find anything else here. Whatever answers existed, whatever had happened to these astronauts, the truth wasn't in this blood-spattered module. It was out there, in that structure, waiting for us just like it had waited for Rutledge and Snyder. And just like them, we were going to go look. Because how could we not? We spent the next 20 minutes searching every centimeter of that module. And let me tell you something about searching a crime scene in a spacesuit. It's nearly impossible. Your fingers are thick and clumsy in the gloves. Your vision is limited by the helmet, and every movement kicks up dust that floats in the zero gravity and gets in the way. But we searched anyway, because we had to. Because somewhere in this cramped metal coffin were answers. Chen documented everything with his helmet camera while Reeves and I physically examined Rutledge's body. I'd seen dead bodies before. Military service will give you that experience whether you want it or not. But I'd never seen anything like this. The suit damage wasn't just melting. When I looked closer, really looked, I could see that the material had been reorganized. That's the only word I can think of. Like the molecular structure had been pulled apart and put back together wrong. "Mitchell, help me turn him," Reeves said. We carefully extracted Rutledge from the storage compartment. And yes, it felt as wrong as it sounds, manhandling a frozen corpse in 1/6 gravity. and rotated him so we could see his back. That's when my blood turned to ice. The back of the suit had holes, not punctures from micrometeorites or tears from sharp edges. Holes, perfectly circular, about 2 centimeters in diameter, arranged in a pattern across his spine and shoulder blades, 6 of them total, and around each hole, the suit material was crystallized, like it had been flash frozen and then heated, and then frozen again. "Those aren't entry wounds," Chen said, his voice shaking. "Those are exit wounds. Something came out of him." The implication hung in the air like poison. Something had been inside Commander William Rutledge. Something had burrowed into him, or been injected into him, or grown inside him, and then it had forced its way out through his back, through the suit, into the vacuum of space. I looked at his face again through the cracked visor, at those wide-open eyes, and I understood something that made me want to vomit inside my helmet. He'd been alive when it happened. The defensive posture, the expression of terror, the way he'd tried to hide himself in that storage compartment, he'd been conscious and aware as something emerged from inside his own body. "We need to find Snyder," I said, my voice rough. "Now." We tore that module apart. We checked every compartment, every storage locker, under every panel we could remove with the tools we had. Nothing. Leona Snyder was not in the Apollo 20 Lunar module, which meant she was somewhere else, somewhere out there on the surface, or inside that structure. The structure that was currently broadcasting a signal directly at us. That's when Chen found the notebooks. They were wedged behind the communications panel, wrapped in a thermal blanket like someone had deliberately hidden them. 3 spiral-bound notebooks, the kind you'd buy at any office supply store, filled with handwriting. "Mission logs," Chen said, carefully pulling them out. Handwritten. They must have stopped using the official recording equipment. He opened the first one, angling it so his helmet camera could capture the pages. The handwriting was neat at first. Controlled, standard mission documentation. Date, time, location, technical observations. But as Chen flipped through the pages, the handwriting deteriorated. It got larger, more erratic, with words underlined multiple times, exclamation points, and eventually sections that were just the same phrase written over and over. "They know, they know, they know." Reeves took the second notebook and started reading aloud, her voice steady, but I could hear the strain underneath. "Day 8. Entered the structure at 1400 hours. Interior is larger than external dimensions suggest. That's impossible, but it's what we observed. Walls are covered in symbols that hurt to look at, not because they're complicated, but because they're too simple, like they're the most basic possible way to communicate something we shouldn't understand. Found the chamber. God help us. We found the chamber." She paused, flipping pages. "There's a gap here. 3 pages have been torn out. Then it picks up again. Day 9. Leona is showing symptoms. She says she can hear them. Not words, not sounds, but knowing. She knows things she shouldn't know. She told me the exact moment Houston would lose our signal tomorrow. She told me what they would say when they tried to re-establish contact. How could she know that? How could she possibly?" Reeves stopped reading. Her hand was shaking. I grabbed the third notebook. The handwriting in this one was different. Smaller, more cramped. Definitely a woman's writing. Snyder's. The entries were sporadic, undated, just streams of consciousness that got progressively more disturbing. "It's not a structure, it's a trap. It's been here for thousands of years waiting for someone curious enough to open it. We opened it. We let them know we're here, and now they're interested in us. They want to understand us. They want to take us apart and see how we work. Not metaphorically, literally. They've already started with me. I can feel them in my blood, in my bones. Restructuring, repurposing. I'm not afraid anymore. That's how I know it's too late. The fear is gone and there's just curiosity. Their curiosity. I understand now, the harvest. That's what this is. The moon is a collection point. How long have they been taking us? How many of us have disappeared and been brought here, and we just thought it was accidents or getting lost, or the entry ended mid-sentence. The next page was just a drawing. Chen tilted his helmet so we could all see it clearly. It showed the interior of the structure, a large circular chamber with a high ceiling. And hanging from that ceiling, like stalactites in a cave, were things. Shapes. Some of them looked vaguely humanoid. Others didn't look like anything from Earth. And at the bottom of the page, in letters so forcefully written they'd torn through the paper, Snyder had written, "They're still alive, still conscious, can't die, won't let us die, harvest never ends." I felt my throat close up. My vision started to tunnel. Reeves grabbed my arm, steadying me. Breathe, Mitchell. Slow breaths. Stay with me. I forced myself to inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The panic receded, but the horror didn't, because I understood now what had happened to Rutledge and Snyder. They'd gone into that structure. They'd seen something, and something had gotten into them. The final entries were in Rutledge's handwriting again, but barely legible. Day 12. Snyder went back. I told her not to. I begged her, but she said she had to. She said they were calling her and she had to answer. I'm alone now. I can feel it starting in me too. The changes. My bones ache. My skin feels wrong. There are things moving under my skin. I've locked myself in the module. I've destroyed the communications array so Mission Control can't track us anymore. Nobody else can come here. Nobody else can find this place. This is where it ends. This is where we... And then the writing just stopped. Not at the end of a sentence or even a word. Mid-letter, the pen had simply stopped moving, like his hand had frozen, or like something had taken control of it and decided he'd written enough. We stood there in that blood-spattered module, reading and rereading those final desperate words, and the full weight of our situation settled over me like a lead blanket. We weren't here on a recovery mission. We were here because the same people who'd sent Rutledge and Snyder to their deaths had decided to send 6 more bodies to see what would happen. They'd known. The whole time they'd known what was in that structure, what it did to people, and they'd sent us anyway. We need to leave, I said. Right now. We take these notebooks, we document what we found, and we get the hell off this rock. Reeves nodded. Agreed. Mission parameters have changed. We're aborting, but Chen wasn't moving. He was staring at that drawing of the chamber, at those hanging shapes, and I could see in his eyes that he was putting something together. The signal, he said quietly. It's not a distress beacon. It's not equipment malfunction. It's a lure. They know we're here. They've always known, and they're calling us, just like they called Snyder. Then we don't answer, I said firmly. We take what we have and we leave. I reached for the notebooks, ready to secure them in my suit's sample pouch. But as my gloved hand touched the pages, something happened. The signal that our module had been detecting, the one coming from the structure, suddenly got louder. Not just louder. I could hear it. Inside my helmet, inside my head, bypassing my ears entirely and going straight into my brain. It wasn't sound. It was knowing. A feeling of absolute certainty that we needed to go to the structure, that we needed to see what was inside, that everything we wanted to understand, every answer to every question we'd ever had, was waiting there in that chamber. And the terrifying part, the part that made my hands shake and my breath come in short gasps, part of me wanted to go. Part of me wanted to walk those 2 kilometers and step inside and finally understand. That's when I knew we were already infected. Whatever had gotten into Rutledge and Snyder, whatever had made them go back to that structure even knowing what would happen, it was starting in us too. And we had maybe hours, maybe minutes, before we'd be too far gone to stop ourselves from following them into the dark. We brought the notebooks back to our module, moving as fast as you can move in 1/6 gravity while trying not to trip over your own feet. The whole time, that signal was there in the back of my head. Not loud, not painful, just present. Like someone calling your name from another room, like a finger tapping on your shoulder that you can't quite turn around fast enough to see. When we climbed back through the hatch and sealed it behind us, I felt a momentary relief, like we'd put a barrier between us and whatever was out there. But I knew better. Barriers don't mean anything when the threat is already inside your head. We spread the notebooks out on the equipment bench, and all 6 of us crowded around, trying to read by the harsh LED lights of the module's interior. Start from the beginning, Reeves said. We need to know everything. Exactly what they found and when they found it. The first notebook was clinical, almost boring. Standard mission documentation for the first 3 days. Landing coordinates, equipment checks, initial geological surveys. Rutledge wrote like a man who'd done this before, precise and methodical. But on day 4, the tone changed. 14:30 hours. During surface EVA, Snyder reported an anomaly at bearing 270, approximately 2.1 kilometers from landing site. Used binoculars to observe. Structure confirmed. Not natural formation. Repeat, not natural. Geometric patterns visible on surface. Estimated dimensions, 50 meters wide, 30 meters tall, partially buried in regolith. Mission control has been notified. Awaiting instructions. Then, 3 hours later, 17:30 hours, received response from Houston. Orders are to maintain position and conduct standard mission objectives only. Do not approach the structure. Do not make physical contact. Observation from distance only. Mission specialists will be sent on follow-up flight. Snyder is not happy with these orders. Neither am I, to be honest. We came all this way and we're supposed to just look at it, but orders are orders. Day 5 is where things started to go wrong. Chen read this section aloud, his voice getting quieter with each sentence. 600 hours. Neither of us slept well. Snyder reported dreams. Vivid, detailed dreams about the interior of the structure. She described rooms she's never seen. Corridors that shouldn't exist. She drew them. I'm including her sketches here. He held up a page covered in pencil drawings. They showed hallways that curved in ways that hurt to look at. Doorways that seemed to lead to spaces larger than the rooms they were attached to. She shouldn't know what's inside. We haven't been there. But she's describing it like she's already walked through it. When I asked her how she knew, she just said, "They're showing me." Who's they? What's they? She won't clarify. The next entry was just 2 hours later. 0800 hours. Houston has noticed irregularities in our biotelemetry. Heart rates elevated. Brainwave patterns showing unusual activity during sleep cycles. They're asking questions. I don't know what to tell them. How do I explain that we're both dreaming about the same place we've never been? Reeves took over reading, flipping through pages rapidly now, scanning for the critical information. Day 6. We went. I know we weren't supposed to. I know we disobeyed direct orders, but we had to. The pull was too strong. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was need. We suited up at 0300 hours when Houston wouldn't be monitoring us closely. Took the rover. The structure is bigger up close. So much bigger. The entrance was obvious. A triangular opening about 3 meters tall, perfectly smooth edges. No door. We hesitated at the threshold. Snyder's biomonitors were going crazy, mine too. But we went in. God help us. We went in. There was a long gap here, blank pages like Rutledge hadn't known what to write. Then, I don't know how to describe it. The physics are wrong. The space inside is larger than the external dimensions allow. Corridors that slope up but you're walking down. Rooms that... The sentence ended abruptly, scratched out so violently the pen tore through the paper. The next entry was in Snyder's handwriting, and her description was more specific but somehow more terrifying. We walked for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe no time at all. Found the central chamber. It's a sphere, perfect sphere, maybe 40 meters in diameter. The walls pulse, not mechanically, organically, like they're breathing, and hanging from the ceiling, suspended by nothing I could see, were containers, transparent containers, and inside them were specimens. That's the only word that fits. Biological specimens. Some were recognizable. I saw what looked like a dog, something that might have been a dolphin, birds, insects, and others that I couldn't identify. Arranged in rows, hundreds of them, maybe thousands extending up into the darkness. And then we saw the human ones. I felt my hands go numb. Chen had stopped reading and was just staring at the page. "Keep going," I said. "We need to know." Snyder's writing got smaller, more frantic. They were alive. The specimens were alive. I could see them moving, breathing, eyes tracking our movement. How long have they been there? Some of the containers looked ancient, others newer. And at the far end of the chamber we found empty containers, waiting, ready. That's when we understood. This isn't a structure. It's not a base or an outpost. It's a collection facility. The moon is a storage point. They've been harvesting from Earth for thousands of years, maybe longer, bringing specimens here where they're preserved, studied, kept alive indefinitely for purposes we can't begin to understand. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, is that the specimens know. They're conscious. They can see us. And some of them were trying to communicate, trying to warn us, but we couldn't understand. We didn't have time to understand because that's when they noticed us. They. That word appeared over and over in the remaining entries, but neither astronaut ever clearly described what they were. Rutledge tried. Not physical in the way we think of physical. Not exactly energy either. Something in between. Present but not visible. You don't see them. You feel them. You feel their attention on you like weight, like pressure, like drowning in air. They surrounded us. I don't know how many. Could have been 3, could have been 300. And they were curious. Imagine being a butterfly under a microscope, and the microscope is looking back at you, and the microscope is alive and it's thinking about you. and you can feel every thought pressing down on your wings. That's what it was like. They were studying us, learning us. And then another scratched-out section, more torn pages. When the narrative resumed, everything had changed. We ran. We made it back to the module. But something's wrong. Something came back with us, inside us. I can feel it in my cells, in my DNA, restructuring everything I am from the inside out. The final dated entry was day 12, and Reeves read it with a voice that had gone completely flat, emotionless, because emotion wouldn't make it through this. Snyder went back this morning. I tried to stop her. I physically grabbed her, held her down, but she's stronger now, much stronger. She broke my grip like it was nothing and walked out. She didn't take a helmet. She didn't need one. I watched her through the viewport walking across the lunar surface with no suit, no oxygen, nothing, and she wasn't dying. She was changing. Her body was adapting, restructuring in real time to survive in vacuum. That's what they do. They take what we are, and they change it into what they need. And now I can feel it starting in me. The changes. My bones feel hollow. My lungs are filling with something that isn't fluid. I'm becoming something else. Something that can exist here, in this place, forever. I'm destroying the communications equipment. I'm locking down this module. No one else can come here. No one else can find us. This is where it ends. They know we're here. They've always known. They're patient. They'll wait. And when the next ones come, because there will always be next ones, humans are too curious not to come. They'll be waiting. They know we're here. They know. They know. The writing devolved into just those 3 words repeated hundreds of times, getting larger and more erratic until the pen had been pressed so hard it tore through multiple pages. And then nothing. The notebook ended. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound our breathing and the mechanical hum of the module's life support. Finally, one of the Navy guys spoke up. We're leaving, right now. We fire up the engines and we get off this rock and we never look back. Reeves nodded. Agreed. We have the notebooks. We have photographic evidence. Mission accomplished. Let's go home. But Chen was shaking his head slowly, and I could see something in his eyes that scared me more than anything in those notebooks. We can't, he said quietly. Don't you understand? If Snyder walked out there without a suit and survived, if the changes can happen that fast, then it's already in us. They let us come here. They wanted us to come here. And if we go back to Earth, carrying whatever this is, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew. Chen looked at each of us in turn. I'm suggesting we have 2 choices. We leave now and risk bringing contamination back to Earth. Something that can restructure human biology. Something that has clearly been collecting specimens from our planet for millennia. Or, he paused, and I saw him swallow hard. Or we go to the structure. We find out what we're dealing with. We document everything. And then we make an informed decision about whether it's safe to go home. The silence that followed was crushing. He was right, and we all knew it. We couldn't go back to Earth without knowing if we were infected. We couldn't risk bringing this to our families, our children, our entire species. But going to that structure, after reading what it had done to Rutledge and Snyder, after seeing the holes in his back, and reading about specimens hanging in containers still conscious after God knows how long, we were ordered not to approach it. Reeves said, but her voice lacked conviction. Screw the orders, I said, and I was surprised by how angry I sounded. They sent us here knowing what happened to the Apollo 20 crew. They knew, and they sent us anyway. We're not following their orders anymore. We're making our own call. We go, we see, we document, and then we decide together what happens next. I looked around at the others. All in favor? 5 hands went up. Only 1 guy abstained, the Army Ranger, and even he looked conflicted. Then it's decided, Reeves said, and I heard her take a deep breath. We check our equipment, we arm ourselves, and we go see what's waiting in that structure. God help us all. We left the module at 800 hours, all 6 of us this time. No one was staying behind. Whatever happened, we'd face it together. We'd checked our weapons 3 times, our oxygen levels 4 times, our communications equipment, until Reeves told us to stop, because we were just delaying the inevitable. The walk to the structure took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of silence except for our breathing and the occasional crackle of static on the comms. 40 minutes of watching that thing get bigger and bigger on the horizon until it dominated our entire field of view. And with each step, that pull got stronger. That feeling of being called, of being wanted, of something waiting for us that had been waiting for a very, very long time. Chen was in the lead, following the coordinates from Rutledge's notes. I was right behind him, with Reeves on my left. The other three spread out in a loose formation, weapons drawn, even though none of us believed guns would make any difference against whatever was inside. When we got within 100 meters, I stopped walking. I just stopped and stared, because my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The photographs hadn't captured it. The notebook descriptions hadn't prepared me. The structure wasn't built. That's the first thing I understood. It wasn't constructed from materials brought here and assembled. It was grown, or formed, or maybe it had always been here, and we just couldn't see it until we got close enough. The surface was smooth but not metallic, dark but not quite black, and it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was roughly rectangular, maybe 50 meters wide and 30 meters tall like Rutledge had estimated, but the dimensions felt wrong, like it was somehow bigger than the space it occupied. And covering every centimeter of the visible surface were symbols, not carved or painted, embedded, part of the material itself. They were geometric but organic, mathematical but alive, and looking at them made my eyes water and my head ache. "Jesus Christ," one of the Navy guys whispered. "What is that?" "Nothing from Earth," Chen replied, and his voice had that particular tone of a scientist whose entire understanding of reality had just been shattered. "Nothing that evolved on our planet could create this. The engineering, the materials science, the physics required, we're not even close. We won't be close for hundreds of years, maybe thousands." He moved closer, reaching out like he wanted to touch it, and Reeves grabbed his arm. "Don't. Not yet. We approach carefully. We observe. We don't make contact until we understand what we're dealing with." But even as she said it, I could see her hand trembling. We were all scared. The kind of scared that goes beyond fear for your own life and becomes fear for the entire human race. Because this thing, whatever it was, had been here longer than human civilization, and we had no idea what it wanted. The entrance was exactly where Rutledge had described it. A triangular opening about 3 meters tall with perfectly smooth edges that seemed to exist in slightly more dimensions than they should. There was no door, no barrier, just an opening that led into absolute darkness. We stood at the threshold for a long moment, our helmet lights playing across the entrance, revealing nothing. "Okay," I said, and my voice sounded too loud in my own ears. "We go in pairs. Chen and I first. Reeves and Kowalski second. Davis and Martinez, your rear guard. We stay in visual contact at all times. If anyone sees anything at all, we back out immediately. Understood?" Everyone nodded. I checked my weapon one more time. A modified pistol that probably wouldn't do anything but made me feel slightly less helpless, and stepped through the entrance. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything changed. The darkness wasn't absence of light. It was presence of something else. My helmet lights cut through it, but only barely, creating weak cones of illumination that seemed to get absorbed after a few meters. The air, if you could call it air, felt thick, resistant, like walking through water but without the wetness. And the temperature reading on my suit display was going haywire, jumping between -200 and +100 Celsius every few seconds. "That's impossible," Chen muttered behind me. "Temperature can't fluctuate like that. The sensors must be malfunctioning." But I didn't think they were malfunctioning. I think the structure didn't obey normal thermodynamics, normal physics, normal anything. We moved forward slowly, our boots making no sound despite the fact that there was a floor. I could feel it under my feet, solid and real. But when I looked down, my helmet light showed nothing, just darkness, like we were walking on solidified void. The corridor, because that's what it was, though corridor feels like too human a word for it, curved gently to the left. Or maybe it curved to the right, or maybe it didn't curve at all, and the space itself was twisting around us. My inner ear was screaming that something was wrong with the geometry, that we were walking in directions that shouldn't exist. But my eyes showed a simple hallway. The walls were covered in those symbols, thousands of them, millions maybe, arranged in patterns that almost made sense. Like I was on the verge of understanding them, like if I just looked a little longer, or thought a little harder, they'd suddenly become clear. "Don't stare at them," Reeves warned. "Keep moving. Don't try to read them." But it was hard not to. They pulled at your attention like a visual undertow. Behind us, Davis suddenly spoke up. "Contact. I've got movement. 6 o'clock. We all spun around, weapons raised, lights sweeping the corridor we'd just walked through. Nothing. Just the entrance about 20 meters behind us. Still visible, still open. What did you see? I asked. I don't know. Something moving, or maybe the shadows moving, or maybe nothing. His breathing was getting faster. I could hear the edge of panic in his voice. We continued deeper. The corridor opened into a larger space, not quite a room, more like a widening of the passage. And that's where we saw the first container. It was suspended in the center of the space, about 2 meters off the ground, held there by nothing visible. Transparent material, roughly cylindrical, maybe a meter tall and half a meter wide. And inside it was something that might have once been a bird. Might have been. It had feathers, or what looked like feathers, but they were crystalline now, catching the light from our helmets and refracting it in colors that shouldn't exist. Its eyes were open. They tracked our movement. "It's alive," Chen whispered, and I heard the horror in his voice. "After all this time, it's still alive." I forced myself to look away and immediately wished I hadn't, because now I could see there were more containers. Dozens of them, arranged in rows that extended up into the darkness above us, each one containing something: specimens, samples, prisoners. I saw insects I didn't recognize, something that looked almost like a monkey but wrong, a fish that seemed to be swimming in its container despite there being no water. And then I saw one that made my blood freeze. It was human, or it had been human. A man, middle-aged, wearing clothing that looked like it was from the 1950s or 60s. He was standing upright in his container, eyes open, mouth slightly agape, and as our lights swept across him, his eyes followed us. He was conscious, aware, trapped in that thing for 60 or 70 years, unable to die, unable to move, unable to do anything but exist and observe and wait for rescue that would never come. "Oh God," Reeves said. "Oh Jesus Christ. How many people have they taken?" We started counting. Just in that one room, we found 17 human specimens. Different ages, different eras judging by their clothing. A woman in what looked like Victorian dress. A child, maybe 8 years old, in 1920s clothing. A man in a World War II uniform. A teenage girl in 1980s fashion. They were all alive, all conscious, all watching us with eyes that held recognition and hope, and an agony so profound it was almost physical. "We have to free them," Chen said, reaching toward the nearest container. "We have to—" "No!" I grabbed his hand. "We don't know what's keeping them alive. We don't know what breaking those containers would do. We could kill them, or worse, we could release whatever process is preserving them and—" I didn't finish the sentence because I didn't want to say it out loud, but we all understood. If we broke those containers, whatever was inside these people might get into us faster. A sound echoed through the structure. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration that you felt in your bones rather than heard with your ears. It came from deeper in, from the central chamber that Snyder had described in her notes. The spherical room, the heart of this place. "They know we're here," Martinez said, and his voice was shaking. Just like Rutledge said, "They know." The pull intensified suddenly, becoming almost painful. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, to run back to the module, to get off this godforsaken rock and never look back. But I couldn't, because I needed to know. I needed to see what was in that central chamber. I needed to understand what had taken these people, what had changed Rutledge and Snyder, what was even now starting to work its way through my own cells. "We keep going," I said, "all the way to the center. We see everything. We document everything. And then we decide what to do." We moved forward, past the containers, past the watching eyes of people who'd been missing for decades, toward the source of that vibration, toward the sphere, toward whatever was waiting for us in the dark. And with each step, I became more certain of one terrible truth. Whatever we found in there, we weren't going to be the same people when we came back out, if we came back out at all. The corridor opened into the sphere, and I want you to understand something. When I say sphere, I mean perfect sphere, mathematically perfect. The walls curved in every direction with such precision that it hurt to look at, like my brain kept trying to find a corner or an edge and couldn't. The chamber was massive, at least 40 meters in diameter, just like Snyder had written, and the entire interior surface pulsed with a bioluminescent glow that cycled through colors I'd never seen before. Not just colors I couldn't name, colors that shouldn't exist in the visible spectrum, colors that made my eyes water and my head pound. And hanging from the ceiling, suspended in mid-air by nothing I could see or detect, were hundreds of containers, maybe thousands. They extended up into the darkness at the top of the sphere in rows so perfectly organized it looked like a catalog, like a library, like a collection. "Oh my God," Chen breathed, and his helmet camera was recording everything, panning slowly across the impossible sight. "This is it. This is the harvest." We spread out, moving along the curved wall, and I started really looking at the containers. They varied in size from small, maybe 20 centimeters tall, to enormous, easily 3 meters or more. The smaller ones contained insects, arachnids, small mammals. I saw a tarantula that was still moving, legs twitching against the interior of its prison. A rat, or maybe a mouse, eyes open and aware. Dozens of butterflies, wings still slowly opening and closing after God knows how many years. The medium-sized containers held larger animals, dogs, cats, birds, reptiles. I saw a golden retriever that couldn't have been more than a few years old based on its coat, but the container it was in had a layer of lunar dust on the outside that suggested it had been here for decades. The dog's tail was wagging, slowly, mechanically, like it had been wagging for so long the motion had become automatic. Its eyes followed us as we passed, and I could see in those eyes a confusion so profound it was almost madness. It didn't understand where it was or why or how long it had been here. It just knew it was trapped and it was alone, and no one was coming to save it. But it was the human containers that destroyed something inside me. There weren't just 17 like we'd seen in the outer chamber. There were hundreds, men, women, children, arranged in neat rows that suggested a cataloging system based on criteria I couldn't begin to guess. Age? Time of collection? Geographic origin? I moved closer to one row and started really looking at the clothing, the physical characteristics, trying to place when these people had been taken. A woman in a flapper dress from the 1920s. A man in clothes that looked medieval, maybe 14th or 15th century. A child in ancient Roman garb, actual Roman, not costume. You could tell by the wear patterns and construction. And then I saw one that made my legs nearly give out. A woman in a fur pelt dress, with bone jewelry, with facial features that suggested she wasn't Homo sapiens, Neanderthal maybe, or something even older. She'd been here for 30,000 years or more, still alive, still conscious, still aware, still waiting. "They've been harvesting from Earth since before recorded history," Chen said, and I could hear him crying inside his helmet. "Since before we were even fully human. This isn't a recent operation. This isn't some exploratory mission. This is systematic, long-term biological collection on a scale that..." His voice broke. "How many people have disappeared throughout history? How many missing persons cases? How many vanishings that we blamed on murder or accidents or just bad luck? How many of them are here?" I didn't have an answer. Nobody did. But I started doing the math in my head and immediately wished I hadn't. If they'd been taking specimens for 30,000 years, even if they only took one person per year, which was clearly an underestimate based on what we were seeing, that was 30,000 people. 30,000 human beings who'd been torn from their lives, brought to the moon, and imprisoned in these containers for eternity, unable to die, unable to escape, just existing in a state of perpetual awareness, watching the centuries pass, waiting for release that would never come. We moved deeper into the sphere, and that's when we found the laboratory sections. That's the only word I can use, even though it implies a level of familiar purpose that wasn't quite right. These were areas where the containers were different, not transparent but translucent, filled with some kind of fluid that glowed faintly. And inside these containers, things were happening. Active experimentation. I saw a human arm, just an arm, severed at the shoulder, that was being systematically taken apart and reassembled in different configurations. The fingers would separate, rearrange, form different patterns, then return to their original position, over and over. The arm was still alive. I could see muscle contractions, could see the fingers flex and move, could see nerves firing in patterns that showed consciousness. Somewhere, disconnected from this arm, was a human being who could still feel their fingers moving, who'd been feeling it for God knows how long. Another container held a human brain, perfectly preserved, suspended in that glowing fluid with thousands of microscopic filaments attached to its surface. The filaments pulsed with light in complex patterns, and on a surface that I can only describe as a screen, though it wasn't really a screen, more like a patch of wall that showed images, I could see what the brain was experiencing. Memories, probably. Dreams, or maybe hallucinations. A childhood birthday party, a wedding, a car crash. The images cycled rapidly, being recorded, analyzed, catalogued. Someone's entire life, their every experience and thought, being systematically extracted and studied. This is what they do, Reeves said quietly. They're not just collecting specimens, they're collecting information. Everything we are, everything we know, everything we've ever experienced. They're harvesting it. They're learning us. Chen moved to another section where the containers were larger, more complex. And they're not just studying us, they're improving us. Look, he pointed to a container that held something that had definitely been human but wasn't anymore. It still had the basic structure, 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head, but everything had been upgraded. The bones were visible through translucent skin, and they weren't bones anymore. They were some kind of crystalline lattice that looked impossibly strong and impossibly light. The muscles had been restructured, layered in ways that would provide strength human muscles could never achieve. The lungs were larger, more efficient, adapted for extracting oxygen from nearly anything. And the brain, the skull was partially transparent, and I could see the brain had been augmented with structures that definitely weren't natural. Neural pathways that glowed faintly, processing centers that extended beyond what human biology allowed. This is what they were turning Snyder into, I said. This is what was happening to Rutledge. They're not killing us. They're transforming us, making us into something that can survive here, something that can serve whatever purpose they have in mind. We found evidence of other species too, not just from Earth. Containers that held creatures I couldn't begin to classify, things with too many limbs or no limbs at all, things that seemed to exist in states between solid and liquid, things that my brain refused to process as real, even though I was looking right at them. This wasn't just Earth's collection. This was a harvest from multiple worlds, multiple species, all brought here to the moon for study and preservation and transformation. How many planets had they visited? How long had they been doing this? And most terrifying of all, why? What was the purpose? Were they scientists? Archivists? Preparing something? I found a section that looked like a timeline, a wall covered in symbols that corresponded to different containers, showing when each specimen had been collected. The oldest ones I could identify dated back hundreds of thousands of years. Earth wasn't even their first harvest site. It was just one of many. We were one collection among thousands, maybe millions. We weren't special. We were just specimens, just data points in a study so vast and so ancient that the human race from birth to extinction would barely register as a footnote. That's when we found the active collection chamber, the section where new specimens were being prepared for harvest. Empty containers, dozens of them, arranged and waiting. And in the center of this section was something that made every hair on my body stand up. A device. The closest thing I can compare it to is an MRI machine, but that comparison is like calling a nuclear reactor a campfire. It was circular, about 3 meters in diameter, with an opening in the center just large enough for a human body. The interior surfaces were covered in those filaments we'd seen attached to the brain. Thousands of them, millions maybe, all waiting to interface with nervous tissue. This was how they did it, how they took people from Earth to the moon. Not with ships, not with physical travel. With this, some kind of quantum displacement device that could pluck a person from anywhere on Earth and materialize them here in this chamber. Instantaneous, undetectable. One moment you're walking down a street in New York or hiking in the Himalayas or sleeping in your bed, and the next moment you're here and the filaments are connecting to your nervous system and you're being cataloged and studied and transformed. We need to destroy this, Martinez said, and his voice had gone hard and cold. We need to bring this whole structure down. We can't let this continue. We can't, but Chen was shaking his head. We can't. Look at the power readings. He held up a device that was showing energy signatures I didn't understand. This structure is tapped directly into the moon's core. It's pulling geothermal energy on a scale that shouldn't be possible. If we try to destroy it, if we disrupt those power flows, we could crack the moon in half. We could alter its orbit. We could kill everyone on Earth. He looked at us with eyes that had seen too much. They built this to last. They built it so we couldn't stop it even if we found it. We're not just outmatched technologically. We're outmatched strategically. They've been planning this for longer than our species has existed. The truth of what he was saying settled over us like ash. We couldn't destroy it. We couldn't stop it. We couldn't even slow it down. All we could do was document it, understand it, and somehow warn Earth that they weren't alone, that they'd never been alone, and that somewhere out there in the dark, something was harvesting them piece by piece, building a collection that would outlast the stars themselves. We need to find Snyder, I said finally. She's here somewhere. She has to be. If she's been transformed, if she's become one of them or something else entirely, we need to see it. We need to know what we're dealing with. Because that was the final question, wasn't it? What happened to humans who were fully transformed? Did they die? Did they transcend? Did they become tools for whatever intelligence ran this place? We needed to know. And somehow, I knew we were about to find out. We found Snyder in a chamber beyond the sphere, through a passage so narrow we had to move single file. The passage curved downward, or upward, or sideways. The geometry had stopped making sense an hour ago, and opened into a smaller room that felt different from the rest of the structure. More intimate somehow, more personal. And there she was, Leona Snyder, lunar module pilot of Apollo 20, standing in the center of the room with her back to us. She wasn't wearing a suit. Her skin had taken on a faint, translucent quality, like porcelain or ice, and I could see patterns beneath the surface. Not veins or arteries, something else. Networks of light or energy that pulsed in rhythm with the structure around her. She was connected to it, part of it now. When she turned to face us, I saw that her eyes had changed. They were still human eyes, still her eyes, but they reflected light differently, like there were additional layers to them, additional depth. She looked at us for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice came through our helmet radios, even though she had no radio, no transmitter, no equipment at all. "You came," she said, and her voice sounded wrong. Not distorted exactly, but layered, like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison with slight variations in pitch. "I knew you would. They knew you would. That's why they let the signal continue. They wanted you here. They want to show you." Reeves took a step forward, her hand moving instinctively to her weapon. "Snyder, we're here to help. We can get you back to the module. We can—" But Snyder was already shaking her head, a gesture that seemed too fluid, too smooth. "I don't need help, Sarah. I'm not trapped. I'm not suffering. I'm more than I was. I understand now. I understand what this place is, what they are, what we could become." She moved closer, and I could see now that her feet weren't quite touching the ground. She was hovering, suspended by the same invisible force that held the containers. They're not invaders. They're not conquerors. They're gardeners, curators. They've been tending to life in this galaxy for millions of years, collecting specimens, preserving them, studying them, improving them. Earth is just one garden among thousands. We're one species among millions, and we're so primitive compared to what we could be. Chen's voice was shaking when he spoke. "Leona, listen to me. Whatever they've done to you, whatever they've put in your head, it's not real. It's manipulation. It's truth," Snyder interrupted, and now she was right in front of us, moving faster than should be possible. "Everything I believed about the universe was so small, so limited. I thought we were special. I thought Earth was special, but we're not. We're just one experiment among countless others, and the experiment is still running. They're still collecting data, still refining their understanding. And some specimens—" She looked directly at Reeves, and I saw something in her expression that might have been pity. "Some specimens are selected for transformation, for elevation, to become part of the collection process, to help gather more data, more specimens. That's what happened to Rutledge. That's what's happening to me, and it's what's starting to happen to all of you." That's when I noticed it. On my suit display, my bio readings were off. Heart rate too steady, oxygen consumption too efficient, brain activity showing patterns that the computer flagged as anomalous. I looked at Chen, at Reeves, and I could see in their eyes that they were seeing the same readings. Whatever had gotten into Snyder, whatever was transforming her, it was already working in us. How long had it been? Hours? Since we entered the structure? Since we landed? Since we left Earth? "We're leaving," I said firmly. "All of us. Now. Snyder, you're coming with us whether you want to or not." I reached for her arm, but the moment my gloved hand touched her skin, I felt it. A jolt like electricity, but not painful. Information. Knowledge flooding into my mind that shouldn't fit, that I shouldn't be able to understand. I saw the moon not as a dead rock, but as a living facility, a way station in a network that spanned the galaxy. I saw Earth from above, watched as invisible beams reached down and plucked individuals from crowds, from homes, from isolated places where no one would notice. I saw the containers filling over centuries, millennia, building a catalog of everything that had ever lived on our planet. And I saw the purpose. They weren't doing this out of cruelty or curiosity. They were doing it because something was coming, something that would end everything. And the only way to preserve life, to save even a fragment of what had existed, was to collect it, to store it, to keep it safe in places like this until the danger passed. "Do you understand now?" Snyder asked, and her hand was on my helmet, and I could feel her thoughts mixing with mine in ways that should be impossible. "They're saving us. Not all of us. They can't save all of us, but samples, genetic libraries, consciousness backups, enough to rebuild if necessary, enough to remember what we were." I jerked away from her, my head spinning, my thoughts not entirely my own anymore. No, that's what they want us to believe. That's the rationalization. But those people in the containers, they're suffering. They're conscious. They're aware. That's not salvation. That's torture. Snyder's expression didn't change. Is it? They experience no pain, no hunger, no aging. They exist in a state of perfect preservation. And when the harvest is complete, when enough data has been gathered, they'll be released, reformed, returned to life in bodies that can't die, can't sicken, can't fail. Isn't that better than the alternative? Than burning up when the sun expands? Than freezing when the universe ends? They're offering immortality. All we have to do is accept the cost. Reeves's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Mitchell, we need to contact base. Now. We need to report what we found and get extraction orders." I nodded, grateful for something concrete to focus on, and opened the comm channel back to Earth. Static. I tried again. More static. "Base, this is Mitchell. Do you copy?" "Over." Nothing. I cycled through all our frequencies. Emergency channels, backup channels, everything. Just white noise and occasional bursts of interference that almost sounded like voices, but weren't quite. "They're jamming us," Martinez said, and I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "The structure is blocking our signal. We can't call for help." But Snyder was shaking her head again. "They're not jamming you. They're ignoring you. Earth has always known this place was here. Your governments, your military, your space agencies, they've known for decades. Why do you think the Apollo program was really canceled? Why do you think we stopped going to the moon? It wasn't budget cuts. It wasn't lack of interest. It was an agreement. They agreed to stop sending people here in exchange for..." She paused, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in her transformed features. "In exchange for something. I don't know what. That information isn't available to me yet." "We're leaving," Reeves said again, but this time her voice was different, distracted. She was staring at something over my shoulder, and when I turned to look, I saw another passage had opened in the wall. Not opened. It had always been there, but now I could see it. Now I could understand that it led somewhere important, somewhere I needed to go. The pull was overwhelming. "Sarah, don't," I said, but she was already moving toward it. "I need to see. I need to understand." She looked back at me, and in her eyes I saw the same thing I'd seen in Rutledge's notebooks. That mix of terror and curiosity that defines humanity. That fatal need to know. "Cover me. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, leave without me." And before any of us could stop her, she was through the passage and gone. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then Chen and I ran after her, leaving the others to guard Snyder, and we plunged into that dark corridor, with no idea where it led or what we'd find. The passage was different from the others, tighter, more organic. The walls pulsed visibly, and I had the distinct impression we were moving through something alive, through an organ or a vein. We called for Reeves over the comm, but got no response, just our own breathing and the wet sound of our boots on surfaces that shouldn't be wet. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, the passage opened into a chamber I can barely describe. It was small, maybe 3 meters across, and every surface was covered in those containers. But these ones were different. They were empty, but not waiting for specimens empty. Recently emptied empty. And on the far side of the chamber, standing in front of a surface that showed images I couldn't process, was Reeves. She'd removed her helmet. Her helmet was on the ground, and she was breathing the non-atmosphere of this place, and she was fine, better than fine. Her skin had already started to change, taking on that same translucent quality Snyder had. "Sarah!" I screamed, but she didn't turn around. She was watching the images, absorbing them, and I could see information flowing into her through connection points I hadn't noticed before. Filaments so thin they were almost invisible, attached to her temples, her neck, her spine. Chen grabbed my arm. "Mitchell, we can't help her. She's too far gone. The transformation is too advanced. If we try to pull her out now, it could kill her. Or worse, I wanted to argue. I wanted to run forward and rip those filaments out and drag her back to the module, but I knew he was right. The bio readings I could see on her suit display, because her suit was still functioning even though she wasn't in it anymore, showed changes that weren't compatible with human life. Not Earth human life anyway. She was becoming something else. Something that could exist here, in this place, forever. "Sarah," I said again, quieter this time, and finally she turned. Her eyes met mine, and for just a second, I saw her. The real her. The pilot who'd flown us here. The soldier who'd volunteered for this mission. The human being who'd just wanted to see the stars. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was already changing, already taking on those multiple layers. "I can't go back. I don't want to go back. I can see it all now, Dave. Everything. Every moment from the birth of the universe to its end. I can see why they're doing this. And I want to help them." That's when our remaining comm channel, the emergency frequency, crackled to life. The voice was distorted, broken up by interference, but unmistakably from mission control. "All personnel, immediate evacuation. Structure is not. Repeat. Do not remain. Return to module. Launch in 30 minutes with or without. Consider mission compromised. Leave now." 30 minutes. They were giving us 30 minutes to get back to the module, or they'd leave without us. Strand us here. Let us become specimens in the collection. "We have to go," Chen said, pulling at my arm. "Mitchell, we have to go right now." I looked at Reeves one last time. She was smiling. Not a human smile. Something else. Something that knew too much. "Tell them I found what I was looking for," she said. And then the filaments pulled her backward, into the wall, and she was gone. Just gone. Like she'd never existed. Chen and I ran. We ran back through that organic passage, back through the sphere chamber where Snyder watched us go with eyes that held no recognition, back through the corridors with their impossible geometry, past the containers with their conscious prisoners, through the entrance and out into the lunar surface. We ran the 2 kilometers back to our module in 15 minutes, impossible time, lungs burning, legs screaming, hearts hammering against our ribs. The other 3 were already there, sealing the hatch. "Where's Reeves?" someone asked. I couldn't answer. I couldn't say it out loud. We launched 6 minutes later with 5 people instead of 6. And as we rose above the lunar surface, as the structure got smaller beneath us, I looked back one last time and saw it. Figures standing at the entrance. 2 of them, watching us leave. One was definitely Snyder. The other might have been Reeves. Or it might have been something wearing her shape. Either way, they didn't wave. They just watched. And I knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that we'd be back. Maybe not us personally, but someone would come back. Because humanity can't help itself. We always need to know. We always need to understand. And they knew that. They were counting on it. The harvest was just beginning. The 4-day return journey was silent. Not just quiet, silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody made eye contact. We floated in that tiny capsule, staring at nothing, replaying what we'd seen over and over in our minds. The Navy guys kept checking their bio readings obsessively, watching for signs of transformation. Chen spent hours reviewing the footage from his helmet camera, making copies, encrypting files, hiding data in places he thought they wouldn't find. I just stared out the window at Earth getting bigger, that blue and white sphere that looked so peaceful from space, and I thought about all those people down there who had no idea what was waiting on the moon, what had always been waiting, what would always be waiting. We didn't talk about Reeves. We couldn't. Every time someone started to mention her, their voice would crack and they'd stop. She was gone, transformed, lost, and there was nothing we could do about it except carry the knowledge back to Earth and hope someone would listen. Re-entry was rough, rougher than it should have been. The capsule shook so violently I thought we'd break apart, and for a few seconds I actually hoped we would. Hoped we'd burn up in the atmosphere and take our contamination with us, save Earth from whatever was growing inside us. But we didn't burn. We splashed down in the Pacific, exactly where we were supposed to, and within minutes, we were surrounded by ships. Not the single recovery vessel you'd expect. A fleet, destroyers, frigates, what looked like a hospital ship, and in the center of it all, an aircraft carrier. They pulled us out of the capsule so fast we didn't have time to unbuckle ourselves properly. Men in hazmat suits, full containment protocols, treating us like we were radioactive or infectious. They knew. Somehow they already knew what we'd found up there. They separated us immediately, put us in individual isolation chambers on the carrier, sterile white rooms with airlocks and negative pressure systems. I didn't see Chen or the others for 3 days. 3 days of blood tests, tissue samples, brain scans, psychological evaluations. 3 days of doctors in hazmat suits asking the same questions over and over in slightly different ways. On the 4th day, they moved me. Sedated me first. I remember the needle, the cold spreading up my arm, and then nothing until I woke up in a different facility, underground again, somewhere in the desert, judging by the temperature differentials I could feel through the ventilation system. The room was nicer than the isolation chamber, but still obviously a cell. No windows, one door with no handle on the inside, cameras in all 4 corners. I sat on the bed and waited, because what else could I do? After 6 hours, the door opened, and 3 people walked in. 2 men in suits that screamed federal agent, and a woman I recognized. The same woman who'd briefed us before the mission. The one with the NASA badge and no name. She looked older now, tired. Or maybe I was just seeing her more clearly without the adrenaline and terror clouding my judgment. She sat down across from me, folded her hands on the table between us, and said 5 words that made my blood run cold. "You were never on the moon." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. You were never on the moon. There was no Apollo 20 recovery mission. Major Sarah Reeves died in a training accident 3 weeks ago. Tragic but not uncommon in high-risk military operations. The other 4 members of your team are currently being debriefed at separate locations, and they're being told the same thing. This mission never happened. What you saw never happened. The structure doesn't exist. The specimens don't exist. And if you try to tell anyone otherwise, if you speak one word of this to anyone, journalists, family, friends, a priest, a therapist, anyone, you will be disappeared. Not arrested, not imprisoned. Disappeared. We'll stage a car accident or a home invasion or a sudden heart attack, and you'll be gone. Your family will mourn. They'll move on, and the world will keep spinning like you never existed. She leaned forward, and I could see she believed every word she was saying. This wasn't a bluff. This was a promise. "Do you understand me, Captain Mitchell?" I understood. God help me, I understood perfectly. But I had to ask, why? Why cover this up? Why not tell people? Why not warn them? She laughed, a bitter sound without humor. Warn them about what? That there's an alien structure on the moon that's been harvesting humans for thousands of years? That some of them are still alive in containers up there? That anyone could be taken at any moment with no warning and no way to stop it? What exactly do you think would happen if we released that information? She stood up, started pacing. I'll tell you what would happen. Panic, mass panic, religious collapse, economic collapse, social collapse. Every missing person case in history would be re-examined. Every unsolved disappearance would be blamed on alien abduction. People would stop going outside, stop trusting anyone, stop functioning. And for what? We can't stop it. We can't fight it. We can't even communicate with whatever intelligence runs that facility. All we can do is pretend it doesn't exist and hope they don't decide to accelerate their harvest. What about the others? I asked. What about Chen? What about— Dr. Chen is being dealt with, she interrupted. The Navy personnel are being reassigned to classified positions where they can be monitored. And you— She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. You're retiring, medical discharge, full pension. You'll return to Colorado Springs to your family, and you'll resume your normal life. You'll get a job as a consultant or an instructor. You'll watch your kids grow up. You'll grow old, and you'll never speak of this again. I opened the folder. Discharge papers, pension documents, a new identity packet with updated medical records showing a back injury that necessitated early retirement. They'd already written my future, already decided who I would be for the rest of my life. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't even blink. Then you'll have an accident. Tomorrow, maybe tonight, and your wife will be a widow, and your children will grow up without a father. Is that what you want? No, of course it wasn't what I wanted. So I signed the papers. I signed away my career, my experiences, my truth. I signed an NDA so comprehensive it basically made me a prisoner in my own head. And then they drove me to an airfield and put me on a plane back to Colorado. No debriefing with my team, no closure, no answers to the 1,000 questions burning in my brain. Just a long, silent flight home, with 2 federal agents sitting across the aisle making sure I didn't talk to anyone. Rebecca picked me up at the airport. She threw her arms around me, crying, telling me how worried she'd been, how long 6 weeks had felt. 6 weeks. They'd told her I'd been gone 6 weeks for classified training. It had actually been almost 2 months by my count, but I didn't correct her. What was the point? Emma and Jake were in the back seat, and they looked so happy to see me, so relieved, and all I could think was, how many other children have lost their parents to that structure? How many families have spent years wondering what happened, never knowing their loved ones are still alive, still conscious, trapped in containers on the moon? I tried to go back to normal. I really did. Got a job teaching at a local flight school, went to Emma's soccer games, helped Jake with his homework, attended barbecues with neighbors who wanted to thank me for my service and ask vague questions about what I'd seen overseas. I smiled. I nodded. I told sanitized stories about flying cargo planes and running training exercises. And every night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the changes inside me that hadn't stopped. My heart rate was too steady. My oxygen efficiency was too high. I healed from cuts and bruises faster than I should. I could see better in the dark. And sometimes, late at night, I could feel that pull again, that call from the structure, faint but present, always there at the edge of my consciousness, reminding me that I'd been inside it, that part of it was inside me, that the transformation had started and might never really stop. Was I still human? Or was I slowly becoming something else? Something that could survive on the moon? Something that could join Reeves and Snyder and all the others? 6 months after we returned, I got a phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Chen. His voice was quiet, scared. "Mitchell? It's Richard. Don't say my name. Don't confirm who I am. Just listen." I listened. "They're watching all of us, all the time. But I found something. I hid data, encrypted files, evidence. I'm going to release it. I'm going to tell the world what we found because people deserve to know. They deserve to understand what's up there, what's been taking us. I know it's dangerous. I know they'll come for me. But I can't. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I can't let all those people stay trapped up there while everyone pretends the moon is just a dead rock. So I'm telling you this. If something happens to me, if I have an accident or a suicide, you'll know why. You'll know it was them. And maybe, someday, you'll tell the truth too. Maybe you'll be braver than I was." The line went dead. I tried calling back. Number disconnected. I tried searching for him online. Nothing. It was like he'd never existed. 2 weeks later, I saw a news article. Former NASA scientist found dead in apparent suicide. Dr. Richard Chen, age 52, discovered in his home. Single gunshot wound to the head. No note, no explanation. The article was 3 paragraphs long and buried on page 8 of a local paper. Nobody cared. Nobody investigated. Just another tragedy, another statistic, another person gone. I knew better. They'd killed him. They'd found out about the hidden files. Or maybe they'd known all along and just waited to see if he'd actually try to release them. And they'd eliminated the problem. I went to his funeral. It was small, maybe 20 people. His ex-wife, some colleagues from NASA who looked uncomfortable. And in the back, standing separately, 2 men in dark suits who I recognized from the carrier. They watched the service, watched everyone who attended, taking notes, recording faces, making sure nobody said anything they shouldn't. When it was over, one of them approached me. He didn't say anything, just handed me a card with a phone number on it and walked away. The message was clear. "We're watching you. We know you're thinking about talking. Don't." So I didn't. I went home. I hugged my kids. I kissed my wife. And I kept my mouth shut for 3 years. 3 years of living a lie. 3 years of watching the moon at night and knowing what was up there. 3 years of seeing missing person reports on the news and wondering. 3 years of feeling the changes continue inside me, slow but inevitable. 3 years of being a coward, but I can't do it anymore. Chen was right. People deserve to know, so I'm recording this. I'm telling you everything. I'm uploading it to places where it can't be easily deleted, sharing it with people who might protect it, spreading it as far and wide as I can before they find me, because they will find me. This video will go live, and within hours, maybe minutes, they'll come. There will be an accident, a heart attack, a gas leak, something plausible, something that makes my family grieve but not question, and I'll be gone. But you'll know. You'll know what happened to me. You'll know what's on the moon. You'll know that when people disappear, some of them don't die. They're collected, preserved, studied, transformed, and you'll know that the harvest never stops. It's still happening, right now. Someone, somewhere on Earth, is being plucked from their life and taken to that structure, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Nothing except remember. Remember that we're not alone. Remember that we're not safe. And remember that somewhere up there, in the dark side of the moon, thousands of human beings are waiting. Still alive, still conscious, still hoping someone will save them. I couldn't save them, but maybe you can. Maybe someone reading this will be smarter than me, braver than Chen, powerful enough to actually do something. Find the structure, expose it, force them to acknowledge it, free those people. Or at least let them die. Let them finally rest. They've been waiting so long, too long. They deserve peace. We all do. So here we are, the end of my story. Or maybe the beginning of yours. I'm sitting in my garage right now, recording this at 2:47 a.m. while my family sleeps upstairs. Rebecca thinks I'm working on the car. Emma's away at college now, Northwestern, studying aerospace engineering, because apparently the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, even when the tree is harboring secrets that could destroy everything she believes about the universe. Jake's a sophomore in high school, on the football team, worried about grades and girls and getting into a good school. Normal kid problems. Problems I'd give anything to have. They have no idea what I'm about to do. They have no idea that by the time the sun comes up, their lives might be completely different. I'm sorry for that. God, I'm so sorry. But I can't keep living this lie. I can't keep watching the news and seeing another missing person and knowing where some of them might really be. Let me tell you what's happened in the 3 years since we got back. The physical changes haven't stopped. They've slowed down, maybe plateaued, but they're still there. I don't get sick anymore. Not a cold, not the flu, nothing. I heal from injuries in days that should take weeks. My vision has improved to the point where I can read license plates from 100 yards away. My reaction time is faster than it should be for a man my age. I need less sleep. 4 hours a night is enough now, sometimes 3. My bone density is off the charts according to my last physical, which I lied about to the doctor, told him I'd been taking supplements. And the dreams. Oh God, the dreams. Every night I dream about the structure, about walking through those corridors, about seeing the containers, about feeling that pull to stay, to surrender, to let the transformation complete. Sometimes I dream I'm already there, already transformed, hanging in one of those containers watching new specimens arrive, watching the harvest continue. And the worst part? Sometimes I wake up and I'm not sure which reality is the dream. I tried to find the others, the 3 Navy guys, the Army Ranger. I tracked down 2 of them through military databases I probably shouldn't have access to anymore. One was listed as KIA in a training accident in the Philippines. No body recovered. The other was in a psychiatric facility in Virginia, diagnosed with severe schizophrenia and paranoid delusions. I managed to get a message to him through a sympathetic nurse. He wrote back once. The letter was mostly incoherent, but there was one line that was crystal clear. They're in my head. They never left. I can hear them calling every night. Don't look for me again. Don't become what I am. I never found the other 2. They'd been reassigned to positions so classified they didn't officially exist. Erased. Disappeared into the machine. Maybe they're fine. Maybe they're living normal lives under new identities. Or maybe they're dead, or transformed, or something worse that I can't even imagine. But Chen tried to fight back, and look what happened to him. I've spent 3 years thinking about that phone call, about his voice, the fear in it, but also the determination. He knew what would happen to him. He knew they'd kill him, and he tried anyway because he believed people had the right to know. He believed truth mattered more than safety, more than his own life. I went to his apartment after he died, not right after. I waited 2 months, let things cool down, let them think I'd gotten the message. The place had been cleaned out, completely sanitized. Not just his personal effects removed. I mean, wiped. New carpet. Fresh paint. Like he'd never lived there at all. But I knew Chen. I knew how paranoid he'd become. How careful. So I looked harder. Behind the bathroom mirror, I found a USB drive taped to the wall. Encrypted. It took me 6 months to crack it, working in secret, using computers at libraries and internet cafes. Never the same place twice. Always paying cash. Always covering my tracks. When I finally opened those files, I understood why they killed him. He'd documented everything. Every photo from his helmet camera. Every reading from his instruments. Lab analyses of his own blood showing the cellular changes. And most damning of all, he'd traced the cover-up. He'd found evidence that the government, not just the US government, but governments around the world, had known about the structure since at least the 1960s. that the real reason the Apollo program was scaled back wasn't budget cuts, but an agreement, a treaty. They'd discovered the structure during Apollo 15 or 16, maybe earlier. They'd sent Apollo 20 to investigate in secret, and when Rutledge and Snyder disappeared, when the transformation became clear, they'd made a decision. Contain the information, hide the truth, and hope that whatever intelligence controlled the structure would be satisfied with its current harvest rate and not accelerate. Chen had found internal memos, classified documents from multiple agencies, references to something called Project Silent Moon, orders to monitor missing person statistics for anomalies, protocols for handling potential witnesses, lists of people who'd been retired over the years for knowing too much. His name was on that list. Mine was too. We were both marked for elimination, just a matter of when. The files also contained something else, something that made my blood run cold. Statistical analysis. Chen had spent months, maybe years, analyzing missing person data from around the world, looking for patterns, and he'd found them. Every year, approximately 15,000 people disappear without a trace. No bodies, no evidence, no explanation. That's the global average. Some years it's higher, some lower, but it averages out to 15,000. Not all of them are harvest victims. Chen estimated maybe 10 to 20% are. That's still 3,000 people per year. 3,000 human beings taken from Earth, brought to the moon, and stored in those containers. 3,000 per year for how long? 50 years? 100? 1,000? The math becomes horrifying very quickly. But here's what really got me. Chen had found evidence that the rate is increasing. In 1960, the global disappearance rate was around 12,000 per year. By 1980, it was 13,000. By 2000, 14,000. Now we're at 15,000 and climbing. The harvest is accelerating. Whatever they're doing up there, whatever they're preparing for, it's happening faster. And nobody's talking about it. Nobody's investigating. Because anyone who gets close to the truth either ends up dead, discredited, or institutionalized. I've thought about releasing Chen's files 1,000 times, just dumping them on the internet and letting the world deal with it. But I know what would happen. They'd be taken down within hours, labeled as conspiracy theory, deepfake, the ramblings of a mentally ill man. I'd be found dead of a sudden heart attack or a tragic accident, and nothing would change. The harvest would continue. So I've waited, I've planned, I've prepared, and now I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to release the technical data. I'm not going to show you the photos or the lab results or the documents, because those can be dismissed, debunked, explained away. Instead, I'm going to tell you what to look for, how to see the pattern yourself, how to recognize the truth hiding in plain sight. First, look at the moon. Really look at it. On clear nights, get a decent telescope. Nothing fancy, just something that can resolve surface details. Look at the Delport-Isaac region on the far side. You'll need to wait for libration when that part becomes visible from Earth. It happens. Not often, but it happens. And when you look, really look, you might see something that doesn't belong. An anomaly, a reflection, a shape that's too geometric. The structure is there. You can see it if you know where to look and you're willing to admit what you're seeing. Second, look at missing person statistics. Not just the headlines, but the actual data. NAMUS database. International Missing Persons databases. Look for patterns. People who disappear completely. No trace, no body, no evidence, no logical explanation. People who vanish from secure locations, from their own homes, from places where disappearing shouldn't be possible. Look at the demographics. They take people of all ages, all backgrounds, but there are slight statistical preferences. Slightly more adults than children, slightly more healthy individuals than sick. Like they're selecting specimens based on criteria we don't fully understand. And look at the timing. Chen found that disappearances spike during certain lunar phases. Not full moons, that's folklore, but during specific orbital configurations, when the moon's far side is pointed towards certain population centers. The pattern is subtle, but it's there if you look for it. Third, talk to people. Find others who've noticed strange things. Support groups for families of missing persons. Online forums where people share unexplained disappearances. You'll find stories, lots of stories. Most are just tragedies with mundane explanations. But some describe things that match what we saw. People who disappeared and were later seen, briefly, impossibly, in places they couldn't be, changed, different. People who came back after being missing for days or weeks with no memory of where they'd been but with physical changes they can't explain. Improved health, enhanced abilities, strange scars. Those people were taken, examined, and released, though I don't know why. Maybe they weren't suitable for the collection. Maybe they were returned as some kind of message. Or maybe the transformation was incomplete, and they let them go to see what would happen. Fourth, look at the official narrative around space exploration. Ask yourself why we haven't been back to the moon in decades. The usual explanation is money, lack of public interest, focus on other priorities. But we have the technology, we have the resources, we have private companies now building rockets powerful enough to go there. So why aren't we going? Oh, we talk about going. We make plans, we set dates. But those dates keep getting pushed back. Programs get delayed. Budgets get cut at the last minute. It's like there's an invisible barrier preventing us from going back. Because there is. The barrier is knowledge. The barrier is fear. The people in power know what's up there, and they've decided it's safer to stay away. Safer to pretend the moon is just a dead rock that we've moved beyond. But we haven't moved beyond it. We can't, because part of us is already there. Here's what I think is really happening, based on everything I saw and everything Chen discovered. The structure on the moon isn't alone. It's part of a network. There are collection points throughout the solar system, maybe throughout the galaxy. They've been operating for millions of years, gathering specimens from every world that develops complex life, building a catalog, a library, an archive of everything that has ever lived. And they do it slowly, carefully, in ways that the civilizations they're harvesting from can rationalize and ignore. A few thousand disappearances per year from a planet of 8 billion? That's statistically negligible. Easy to overlook, easy to explain away. And by the time a civilization is advanced enough to discover the truth, to find the collection points, it's usually too late. They've already been harvested for thousands of years. The specimens are already stored. The transformation has already begun in those who've been exposed. That's why they let some people go back. That's why we weren't killed immediately upon return. We're vectors, carriers. The transformation is contagious in a way. Not quickly, not obviously, but it spreads. Everyone I've been in close contact with since I got back has reported strange dreams. My wife, my kids, friends, colleagues. Nothing dramatic, just dreams about the moon, about structures, about feeling called to something they don't understand. It's subtle, but it's there. And I lie awake at night wondering if that's part of the plan. If they're seeding Earth with people who've been changed, who carry the transformation, so that when they finally decide to accelerate the harvest, when they decide to take more than just a few thousand per year, we'll be ready. We'll be adapted. We'll go willingly. Because by then, we won't be fully human anymore. We'll be something in between. Something that belongs to them. I don't know how much time I have left. I finished uploading this video to multiple platforms about an hour ago. Encrypted copies to people I trust. Or at least, people I hope will do the right thing with them. Deadman Switch is set to release everything if I don't check in every 48 hours. It's not a perfect system. They'll probably shut most of it down. But maybe, enough will survive. Maybe enough people will see this before it gets taken down. Maybe enough people will start asking questions, looking at the moon, noticing the patterns. Maybe enough doubt will be sown that the cover-up becomes impossible to maintain. That's all I can hope for. I'm not naive enough to think this video alone will change anything. But it's a start. It's a crack in the wall of silence. And sometimes that's all you need. If you're watching this, if you've made it this far, you're probably thinking I'm crazy. That's okay. I would think the same thing if I were you. But let me ask you this. How many people do you know who've had someone disappear from their life? Not die, not move away, just disappear, vanish without explanation. More than you'd expect, probably. More than statistics say should be normal. And those people who disappeared, where are they now? Really think about it. Where are they? The official answer is dead, missing, presumed dead. But what if some of them aren't dead? What if they're up there, in those containers, still alive, still conscious, still waiting? What if your missing friend, your vanished relative, your disappeared loved one is on the moon right now, watching Earth through transparent walls, wondering why no one's coming to save them? Look, I know how this sounds. I know what I'm asking you to believe. But 3 years ago, I was a rational person. A military officer with a spotless record and a normal life. I didn't believe in aliens or conspiracies or government cover-ups. And then they sent me to the moon, and I saw something that shattered everything I thought I knew about the universe. I saw humans hanging in containers, still alive after decades. I saw technology that defies physics. I saw people I knew transformed into something that shouldn't be possible. And I've been living with that knowledge ever since, feeling the changes in my own body, knowing that I'm becoming something other than human, knowing that they're watching me and waiting for me to either shut up or become a problem that needs to be eliminated. Well, I've chosen door number 2. I'm officially a problem. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to share this video. Share it everywhere. Download it before it gets taken down. Re-upload it. Translate it. Spread it as far as you possibly can. Make it impossible to suppress. I need you to look at the moon and ask yourself what's really up there. I need you to look at missing person statistics and ask yourself where those people really went. I need you to question the official narrative about why we stopped going to the moon, why space exploration has been so limited, why we've spent decades going in circles in low Earth orbit instead of pushing outward. I need you to ask questions, loud questions, public questions, questions that can't be ignored or dismissed, because the only way this stops, the only way those people get freed, is if enough of us refuse to look away, refuse to accept the easy explanations, refuse to let them keep harvesting us in silence. They're going to come for me soon. I've accepted that. I've made my peace with it. I've written letters to my family that will be delivered after I'm gone, telling them I love them, telling them to be strong, not telling them the truth because they're safer not knowing. I've updated my will. I've set everything in order. When it happens, it'll look natural, an accident, a heart attack. Maybe I'll disappear like Chen, like Reeves, like the others. Maybe I'll be found dead in my garage with a suicide note I didn't write. Whatever story they tell, don't believe it. I'm not suicidal. I'm not careless. I don't have any medical conditions that would cause sudden death. If I die or disappear in the next few days, weeks, or months, it's because they killed me. Remember that. Remember my name, Captain David Mitchell. Remember what I told you. And remember that somewhere up there, on the dark side of the moon, thousands of people are waiting. Still alive, still hoping, still human for now. One more thing before I go. If you're military, if you're NASA, if you're in a position of power or authority, I'm begging you, stop this. You know it's happening. You've known for decades. You've made your treaties and your agreements and your strategic decisions to keep it quiet. But at what cost? How many more people have to disappear before you say enough? How many more families have to grieve for loved ones who might still be alive? How many more of us have to be transformed into something other than human before you admit what's happening? You have the power to stop this, or at least to expose it. Yes, there will be panic. Yes, there will be chaos. But there will also be truth. And maybe, just maybe, humanity deserves to know the truth about what's been done to us, about what continues to be done to us. We deserve the chance to fight back, or at least to die with our eyes open. To everyone else, to regular people watching this, stay safe, stay aware. If you feel a strange pull, a calling you can't explain, a dream that feels too real, resist it. Don't go toward it. Don't seek it out. I know it's tempting. God, I know. I feel it every single night. That pull to go back, to return to the structure, to complete the transformation and finally understand everything. But resist it. Stay human. Stay here. Because once you go there, once you cross that threshold, you don't come back. Not as yourself, not as anything your family would recognize. You become something else, something that serves their purposes, whatever those purposes are. And that's a fate worse than death. At least in death, you end. In that structure, you never end. You just exist forever, preserved and studied and changed, while everything you knew and everyone you loved moves on without you. It's almost dawn now. I can see light starting to creep through the garage window. My family will be waking up soon. Rebecca will come downstairs and make coffee. Jake will rush through breakfast because he has an early practice. Emma will call from college like she does every Sunday morning. And I'll pretend everything's normal. I'll smile and talk about the weather and ask about their days. And they'll never know that their husband, their father, is counting down the hours until men in dark suits come to end his life. They'll never know what he saw on the moon, what he became, what he tried to do to save them, to save everyone. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe some truths are too heavy for the people we love to carry. But you, whoever you are, wherever you are, you don't have to carry this alone. Share this video. Find others who've seen it. Build a community. Compare notes. Look for the patterns. Ask the questions. And when they try to shut you down, when they try to tell you it's all conspiracy theory and delusion, remember what I told you. Remember that I was a decorated military officer with no history of mental illness, no reason to lie, nothing to gain from making this up. Remember that Dr. Chen was a respected scientist who died trying to expose the truth. Remember that Major Sarah Reeves was a skilled pilot who gave her life to see what was in that structure. Remember that we're not the first to discover this, and we won't be the last. But maybe, if enough people start paying attention, if enough people refuse to look away, we can be the generation that finally does something about it. Look up at the moon tonight. Really look at it. And ask yourself, what's really up there? What's waiting in the dark? What's been watching us all this time? And most importantly, who's next? Because the harvest never stops. Every day people disappear. Every day the collection grows. Every day we lose more of ourselves to something we don't understand and can't fight. Unless we try. Unless we finally try. So try, please. For me, for Chen, for Reeves, for all those people hanging in containers on the dark side of the moon. For everyone who's disappeared and everyone who might disappear tomorrow. Try to make them acknowledge the truth. Try to force them to stop hiding. Try to save whatever part of humanity is still worth saving. Because I can't anymore. My time is up, but yours isn't. Not yet. Use it wisely. This is Captain David Mitchell, signing off. If you're hearing this, I'm probably already dead, but my story lives on. The truth lives on. And somewhere up there, in the dark, people are still waiting, still hoping, still believing that someone, someday, will come to save them. Maybe that someone is you. Good luck. And whatever you do, don't look at the moon too long. Don't listen too closely to the silence. Don't follow the pull if you feel it calling. Stay human, stay here, stay safe. And remember, they know we're here. They've always known. The question is, what are we going to do about it?